Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world. Hi, and welcome to our next episode of Decoding AQ. I have with me today Karen Calder. It's a great name. It's the name of my wife. My wife's called Karen, but this one is based in Toronto, and she's a leadership coach, culture and change strategist, and facilitator. And I can't wait to dive into conversation with you. So welcome.
Well, good afternoon, Ross.
Why don't I start straight away with, you talk about building people and your clients' full potential with future-ready mindsets and skills. Tell me, what is a future-ready mindset, Karen?
Wow, that's a great question. Great place to start, Ross. I believe that the future is, interestingly enough, all about adaptability and resilience. And so we as human beings are wired for the status quo. We are afraid of the unknown. We are liking where we are, and to go to a future state that isn't guaranteed for us is something that's really scary for our brain. So when I say future ready mindset, I am helping individuals understand that our brain may be wired that way, but it's cross-wired, and that we need to uncross those wires and understand that since the day we were born, we have never known the unknown. Like, we've never known the next. I don't know from moment to moment what's going to happen next. I don't know what next week looks like. I don't know what, and so I live in the unknown anyways, every single day. And so rather than fear it, is just to embrace it and to understand that change, or the next evolution of whatever it is on our existence, is going to happen. And so how do we prepare ourselves for it? So that's what I mean by a future ready mindset.
Future ready. It's an interesting sort of duality and paradox, isn't it? This yearning for both certainty and then the reality that so many things are uncertain. And of course, our brains calculate certainty all the time, right? On a certainty to turning up, on, we take all of this multiple data in from past commitments, from how they've behaved previously, to try and predict how we might behave in the future. And we set goals and we set plans and we use our skills and we navigate this thing called change or life. And I think if we rewind a little, perhaps to your earlier career and where you spent, over 2 decades building a career inside large Fortune 500 companies. And in fact, just before we started recording, you mentioned about somebody in your last role. And your last role, you were an executive and leadership team for Walmart Canada. So huge organization. And some might say, that's a pinnacle. We often aim for a ladder. We grow to the top and go, hey, we've made it. We've kind of done it. But for you, there was something missing when you got there. And often in a lot of conversations I've had, that's been a very true theme. We perceive something as different to when we actually get there. And then the reality hits of, is it something we wanted or not? So tell me a little bit more about that experience and your story, Karen.
So I really believe that we have a story around success, or at least I have a story around success that was my father's story. And my father's story was, get educated, get a job, and have certainty for the rest of your life. And not just any job, that if you're going to do something, do it well. And of course, ensure that you end up at the top of your field. Because if you end up at the top of your field, you have the executive title and pay, then you have stature, right? So what I have learned is that was actually what I had all of that, but I felt like an imposter inside. And I really had a career setback because I wasn't living my why. I wasn't living my purpose. And so I had to take a step back and leave that position. Mostly because it just wasn't a fit. It really just wasn't a fit with my heart. And it actually started with the question that somebody I was working with asked me, and they said, Karen, what brings you joy? And I broke down and cried. And I said, nothing brings me joy at the present moment. And from that moment on, that was such a simple question, but it was so profound for me that I went on this journey to rewire my understanding and my definition of success. So the definition of success today I have is the degree to which I enjoy joy in my life. And I'm much happier as a result. And I went out on my own, so I have a lot more risk than I and a lot more uncertainty than I would have ever had I stayed in the role that I was in. Yet I'm calmer and more confident, and I think more courageous, and just willing to kind of accept, well, I got this.
It's interesting, isn't it? I remember a conversation around whose life are we living, our own or the vision of our lives through someone else's eyes, through someone's lens, where we got applause. We got applause or sought applause from parents, from society, from various places that gave us these definitions, these contracts with our future selves as to what success and that might look like. And then the reality, as we mature and we experience these things, we get the opportunity to rewrite it. We get the opportunity to reimagine what, as you said, brings you joy. The Ikigai concept, this aspect of purpose, of contribution, of fulfillment, of connection, of we are complex beings after all. And how we spend our time, who we spend our time with, is part of that contract of life, and particularly in the work context. So when you realized that, and you had this crescendo moment of a disconnect, that you saw a physical reaction of breaking down and crying, looking back now, were there certain indicators that you could observe that were maybe early warning signs that you couldn't see at the time because you're inside the system? What were they? And if somebody's starting to see them, what would you advise them to think about or do?
Yeah. So I became anxious. That was my first telltale sign. So in other words, I wasn't at my best, Ross. I wasn't showing up every single day, happy and content and, calm. I was more anxious, and I think even sometimes leaning towards a bit, emotional and, and depressed. So to me, those are the early warning signs. And if you're self-doubting yourself, I think that is an early warning sign. So really watching the story that you're telling yourself, really watching how your brain and body are interacting. So our brain tells our body how to react. And if we're telling ourselves a story around, I'm not good enough, and oh my gosh, this is going to come crashing down, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, well, then your body goes into that that fight or flight reaction state. And that's the moment where you have to go, wait a minute, what's going on here? I got to catch myself in this moment and say, what's true? What's really, really true here? And what's being imagined not in a good way? And just challenge yourself to reframe. I love my reframe. It's my power tool. It's my superhuman, thing that I go to get myself back into what I call just sort of that balanced state of, it's actually a state of curiosity. Once I'm in a state of curiosity, my brain will open up to possibility, and I can start. So if I can at least get into questions, why am I feeling this way? What is really, really happening? What is the situation? What are the emotions that I'm feeling? And what's a more empowered or a different and more positive way of looking at the current situation? I can get myself out of it.
And I guess it's interesting because we can feel those feelings when we're facing where we first started in uncertainty, right? When we're facing challenge. And perhaps you still face those things, but the challenge is more aligned to you. So you talked about fit, that you just didn't have the fit with it. See, when you were facing those challenges, the, juice wasn't worth the squeeze. It was the size of the prize, or the effort was out of kilter. And maybe, as you put it, this cross wiring. So what I'm interested in is, how might you know if you might get these sneaky things coming in, but you need to step up to them because it is aligned or not aligned. So how do you tell that difference, really, when a lot of those symptoms that you described might show up for people when they are absolutely in their best place, but they're just having a stretch? Yeah, they're just having a moment.
Yeah, so thank you for that. It went on far too long for me. So it was that I was experiencing those things almost 24/7, and I was working really, really long hours. And so I was sleep deprived as well, on top of all of those feelings. And I had people warning me that I was changing, I wasn't myself. And I kept saying, so I'm a super strong individual. I have always been a high performing, I would say high achieving rather than high performing, because the strategies I was using was mostly, I'm going to muscle my way through this. And there's a difference between muscling my way through it, and overcoming obstacles are two different things. And so my health was starting to take a toll. People were telling me that I was headed for a brick wall, and I wasn't listening to them, because that was never my story. That was not my experience in the past. Everything that I had always achieved in my life, I had overcome. But day in, day out, working as long hours as I was, not taking care of myself, not putting myself first, and certainly not living my truth, ate away at me. And then I got to the point where I just couldn't. I remember sitting on my bed at one evening with a glass of wine, probably way too much wine, throughout all of this. And I said, this cannot be it. I think I was 49 years old at the time. And I went, if this is my life, I don't want it. This was not why I was born. This was not what I was meant to be doing. And I have to go back to living my truth. I have to let go of this definition, this external, everything that was the definition of success was that it was everything that was external to me. If I had all of these things, then I have confidence and I am successful. But the challenge is when those things start going away, right? Let's say you lose a job, or a relationship starts breaking down, right? Our confidence rides that elevator and it starts going down. If we are attaching our success and our identity and our confidence to the external world, versus looking internally and going, I am not those things, I am me. And I always have my confidence with me, no matter what. But when that starts sliding away, to your point, and it's happening on a prolonged period of time, stop. Get some
So
help.
it's that continual depletion of energy, confidence, all of those things. And I guess no amount of reframing could actually overcome that. It might give you a momentary blip, but the reality is that it's a depleting, corrosive environment where you're not thriving. And so in the flip for that, of we might need this crisis moment, this bottom, before we then realize a transformation is required and a change. Others might be able to, maneuver around where their level of bottom might be different to somebody else's. But for you, when you went through that discovery and redefining success, and joy was a component of that for you, what actually brings you joy?
Two things. One really is more freedom, a bit more freedom, not the constraint of being authentic. So the freedom to be me, really brings me joy. So the level of self-expression and creativity, and not to be confined inside walls of an organization. And the second thing is, I love to help people. When I was young, I used to set up a classroom in the basement of my house, and I would have all of my childhood friends sit down, and so I'm a naturally born teacher. I have to be teaching, and so that's my creative expression, and that's my purpose in life. And I need to, I need to express
free
that.
Free to serve.
Free to serve.
Free to serve. And I guess that freedom, how would you describe what freedom means to you?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because it's not, I get to wake up every single day and do whatever the heck I want. And that's not the world construct that we live in.
An authentic self, all of these sorts of things. So what is your meaning of freedom for you?
Choice. Freedom to create. Freedom to, you know what, in the morning, if I just kind of want to wake up and meditate before jumping into, work and making the drive, I want to have that choice. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. And I guess it's without, not necessarily external judgment, but without self-judgment. So
it's mostly self-judgment.
Yeah.
Without the self-judgment.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
And
the interesting thing too is it's the freedom, not to have the vice president title. Okay. I judge myself a lot for that. And even to have this conversation right now in the moment, Ross, when you're saying to me, the freedom to express yourself and to serve and all of that, in our society, that, or at least my definition of it, and I have to always work on my mindset, is that was not a high paying job. That was, that people did that and could not be successful at it. Right. And so I really have to rewire my brain every single day whenever I say that, and say, actually, the freedom to serve is actually quite a noble cause. And if it brings me joy, go back into my definition of joy versus my definition of money and title and status, right? Then that's freedom to me. Sorry.
Then I think it's, for everybody, writing their own contractual definitions of things that matter to themselves is hugely valuable as a exercise for us to do when we talk about these, ground rules of what do we define as success, what do we define as happiness, as joy, as love, of all of these things, and discovering that, trying it on, finding the boundaries and the fringes of that for ourselves, and then finding others that both oppose, bring diversity, have some friction, but in a healthy way. Right. And others that are there that if everything else is so hard in the world, we need some team members that are aligned with us, that champion those same definitions, those same values. And they're the people that we rally call to help us through whatever uncertainty, opportunity, or disruption that we're facing. And I guess along those journeys, we're going to be struggling. We're going to have to endure certain things. And even just that frame of having to, and using words like struggle and endure, what are your relationships with those things? Because I'm really fascinated, when I read people's information that they put out in the world, as what words they choose, what language they have, as to give me insight into who they are and how they might then serve. So tell me a little bit more about the thoughts of a sense of a need or a willingness to struggle or a willingness to endure. How's that shown up in your life? And what have you learned from that?
Oh, wow. I think, I almost think that there's two parts to my life. There was the part of my life 49 and younger, where I said I would use those words. I struggled a lot. And I do understand that the language is really important for us to tap, because that's the stories that we're telling ourselves. And I think I would probably say to you at that time, I am really struggling, or I always feel like I'm a salmon swimming upstream. And that's interesting. That's insightful, to kind of go back to my younger self and say, well, that's the story. What was really happening under there was that I was, I again was not living my purpose. I was following a different dream. I was following what my parents wanted me to do, not in a bad way, honestly, in a really, really great way. But I would say, with what I have gone through recently, and so I'll share my story with you. So I believe that adversity happens, and that you can't stop that. In fact, I want it to happen to some degree in my life, because I think it's only made me stronger. And so in November of 2019, I was diagnosed with cancer, uterine cancer, and it was stage 1. And I had surgery on November 15th. And then on December 5th, I was sitting in the oncologist's office, and this is 2019. And she said, hey, we just got the pathology report back. And she was taking a very long time to explain it all to me. And I'm sitting there, and I think the color must have just drained out of my face, because it was supposed to be stage 1 operation, and then I was finished. But she said they found a second tumor, one metastasized to the other. And so this looks like stage 3. We want you to start radiation in January of 2020, and then chemo 2020 in February, sorry. And so, I mean, I had to take a deep breath, and I had to say to myself, gosh, you know what? I'm on my own. I don't have medical coverage for this, to lose revenue and take care of myself. But because I had done so much work mentally on resilience and strengthening my self-confidence and who I was, I just kind of went, well, this is not going to be my story. Whatever, happens next, I am coming out of this. And this will be a story I will share with others, and it's going to empower me, and it's going to inspire people I talk to. So I'm like, okay, bring it on. And so January, February, radiation. End of February, I start chemo. Well, we all know what happens in March. It happened in March 2020. A global pandemic. And I never used the word struggle once, Ross. This is the post, 50 Karen. I looked at it clearly as an opportunity, and an opportunity to demonstrate to myself I am a warrior, and that I have it, and that I believe in the power of our brain and body, that it can heal ourselves, and that what really matters the most is what I'm telling myself, and how I'm healing myself, and not just leaving it to the power of the medical profession. I felt very empowered going through. It was not fun. Obviously, there was days I felt like my bones were breaking. And I couldn't see anybody. So there was a point, and in March, where I couldn't have anybody in my house because I was so immune compromised. And I just had to really reach deep. But there wasn't a day that I got up out of bed and went, oh, this is really crappy. Why? I just refuse to be a victim. I absolutely have decided in my life that mentality of being a victim is not where I want to live. And I sometimes do get into being a victim, for sure. But I use awareness. Awareness to me is intelligence. Once I have that awareness, I can actually, reframe. And I had to reframe lots in that moment. Anyways, I got through it. I'm okay. It's been a year. Yes, thank you. So the end of May was my last. May 2020 was my last chemo treatment, and I, my hair is growing back, and I'm thriving, and I'm out speaking, and I'm doing everything that I had wanted to do. It's profoundly changed my life, because I don't wait anymore to do something, and I don't worry about what other people think anymore. I just do what I want to do. I'm following my heart and my purpose and my passion.
I knew that there was a reason why our conversation has happened today, and how we've come together, because listening to your story, lots of things were going on in my own mind. And that's what happens, isn't it? When we share something as a human being to others, it will then resonate for connections in different ways. It will make them think in certain things. It might, there might be empathy where, hey, I want to be in Toronto, give you a hug. You know, there could be all sorts of different things going on for people. And where you talked about Karen, 1.0 versus Karen 2.0, of even just the language of how you said, this is a chapter, not the end. This isn't a struggle, this is opportunity. All of those framings that you'd prepared yourself to be able to deal with it. You were perfectly ready for that to show up. And whilst we might, not queue up in the line to say, yes, please, I'll have that one, because that's a challenge I need to get done to make me a new version of myself. When it does show up, the opportunity to, respond versus react, to take control, where you talked about freedom of choice, to not abdicate, you heal me, white coats and doctors. I've learned some things. I'm going to take some control, some choice, the stories I tell myself. And I'll share with you, this year has been quite a challenging year for me and my family as well, in terms of my father had throat and neck cancer a couple of years ago. And this year, he was then diagnosed with lung cancer, stage 4, given 3 to 6 months. And in the same couple of weeks, my wife was then also diagnosed with breast cancer. And about a month later, I fell off the roof where I've been building a home office and yoga studio, and broke my elbow and some bones in my, and it's been one of these years where, interestingly, the story you mentioned about taking control, my father was someone who, our parents have a huge impact on our lives, right? You talked about living your life through a lot of their lens of definition of what success was. And he's a man's man, very strong, where you talked about muscling through versus being able to just do something because you're gifted in it. He was a muscle through guy. Everything that he faced, he would overcome and champion. For those who've listened to other episodes, both my parents were teachers, so there's lots in common here. And he completely transformed his mindset. It took a while. Started reading a few books about radical remission. One of the tipping points was I convinced him to watch Fantastic Fungi. I don't know if you've ever seen the Netflix documentary all about mushrooms. And it opened his mind to this thought that it's not just the institution of our health system that can help you through it. And from a Western, I need to kill it, I need to fight it, I need to get rid of that, to an acceptance of you, I love you, cancer cell. Let me help you return to normal. And a different framing and different pieces. And I'm very blessed with a diverse family. My wife has 2 grown-up sons. We have 6 grandchildren, and a real eclectic mix of thoughts in the world, and the embracing of everything from chanting through to my father went down the radiotherapy, immunotherapy, chemotherapy, lots of different things. My wife is following something very different, which is out of Canada, as a different scientific treatment to deal with hers. And where you said, and I'm conscious, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking, I prefer listening, but this notion that adversity shows up in life. And when we're talking about how do we adapt to this new environmental reality, be it a job, a work role, an identity, or a health challenge, it's all of these, as you said, future ready mindset and skills that will then enable us to thrive through them. And another question that I'd just love to let you talk about a bit was this notion and thought about self-forgiveness and not wanting to be a victim and taking some control. And throughout your stories, I guess there would have been various forgivings you needed, to forgiving of a definition of before, to following different choices. But what do we need to forgive ourselves for, and how does that help us move forward at points of challenge?
Oh, forgiveness is so powerful, Ross. So first of all, I hope your father and your wife are doing well. So I send them lots of healing energy. Um, and I think it's forgiveness, acceptance, and then being able to let go. So for me, where it started was I just needed to forgive my father for some of the definitions and really him just wanting to, to do well. I needed to forgive myself mostly around my younger self, not having this awareness and not having, I guess, the tools to have a strong, resilient mindset. And uh, yeah, it's forgiveness to me is so reverent. It's so spiritual. For that ability to do that for others in your life and to do that for yourself is really truly that acceptance and letting go. And then it gives you the opportunity to create your life in a different way. Like, what's the point of hanging on to all of that? I just don't I don't, that's, I think what can make people ill. I think hanging on to notions and anger and disappointments and stories of the past, I think can make us ill, or not want to try new things, not want to adapt. And yeah.
And I guess it's these realities of having awareness, acknowledging, and that those are our perceptions and thoughts, not the situation itself.
Right.
And so therefore giving ourselves, as you said, sometimes a break, sometimes permission to change a definition. These can be just proposals to start
Yeah.
with.
Yeah,
Right.
right. It goes back to us, to the language. And I just want to share
Yeah.
one other little quick thing
Yeah,
with you.
please.
So when I was 26 years old, I went to visit my sister in Florida, and with her family there. And one morning I just asked to be dropped off of the beach. And so you have to remember, I'm a little bit older than maybe people on your podcast, but I had a Sony Walkman that was yellow, right? And I had cassette tapes, and I took my Deepak Chopra 7 Spiritual Laws of Success with me, and I took Tony Robbins, so quite different, vastly different. And I remember sitting on the beach with my towel, on, like, sitting on top of my towel, looking out at the ocean and seeing an ocean liner on the horizon, moving very, very slowly. And I can remember, after listening to all of the both of these gentlemen speak, and really asking that question that Deepak Chopra asked, which is, what is your dharma? What is your purpose? And what came to me was, I am a motivational speaker. I want to, serve and inspire, and do that on a big stage. And I really felt that in my heart of hearts. And I remember at the end of the day, and I had journaled it all out. I've kept it. I'm going to write a book about it. And I went home and told my sister, and she's like, you can't make much money as a speaker. And so there it started, right? It started the whole doubting myself, whether I could actually be a motivational speaker and support myself financially. And so I went back to Alberta, and I went back to my corporate job, and I tell people I left my dream on the beach. And that was because of a couple things. One is I wasn't ready, mentally strong enough to kind of rally against what others were telling me. And I wasn't aware enough that the definition I was using was not necessarily the definition that was in my soul of success, which was, get a job and ride the corporate wave. So I've had to do a little bit of forgiveness around myself for that, because I often have thought about, well, what a different direction my life would have gone had I followed my heart. And, maybe I would have avoided the anxiety and the depression and kind of making some of the mistakes. But then I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, all of those things makes me who I am today. Also, they're great stories to share with others. I am relatable. It has built a lot of empathy inside of me. So I have forgiven myself and said, life is a learning journey. It's an evolution. We are born to just, evolve our souls. And so that's what I did in this lifetime. And here I am today, and I'm going to embrace today, because today is all I have. And I can't wait for tomorrow.
It's lovely, isn't it? This thought of dreams coming full circle, that they show up and spark off, and then we think that the path was to take them at that moment, and if we don't, then hey, we've lost it. But sometimes it comes full circle at the moment that it needs to show up. And so the strength, as you said, to redefine meaning from people that you respect is hardest. And people that you value is hardest, whether they are our family or maybe they are the inspirational leaders, the Tony Robbins, the Dalai Lamas, all of these people influence our own definitions. And then we reach a point when we define for ourselves, and we can then go out and share and create our own definitions. And so the perpetual journey goes on, because someone will then see someone else's, and we go round. So I think it's a lovely part that you just described as evolution, and to be at peace with that, and to show up in this balance of both forgiveness and ambition. And these dualities and paradoxes are stuff that I love. And I want to dive in before we finish up, Karen, about your 5 R's workshop. And this is about building resilience through mental toughness and self-discipline. So tell me more about that.
I believe in a practice called the mental gym. Okay. And I use it. And, people say, you need to get in the gym, mental gym, 5 times a day. I don't set a time limit. I go into my mental gym whenever I notice that I am just not at my best, or I'm a little off kilter, or there's what I call those emotions that are detracting from, my energy level, and I notice that my energy is decreasing. In that moment, I say to myself, wait a minute, I'm going to get into my mental gym and figure out what, kind of what's going on. So that's the first R, that it's just recognize. So it's just recognize my thoughts, find a quiet moment, close my eyes, and get inside my own head. Really understanding the story that you tell yourself is so powerful. And to have that awareness throughout the day, am I working for me or am I working against me, is a game changer. Because the next step in my R is reframe. You don't want to work against you, and yet so many people we do. We are so incredibly hard on ourselves as human beings. We don't outright express that often, and so we think nobody else is having that experience. And I'm going to tell you, from the amount of coaching I have done and working with individuals inside organizations, everybody and now and then doubts themselves. And so it's like, okay, I'm doubting myself. I recognize that. Now, what's the situation and how does it make me feel? And what's a more, and if you can't think of what's the more empowering thought, think of a time when you felt more empowered, and try to get into your mental mindset then. And then the third R is reimagine. You mentioned imagination. I love imagination, but you cannot imagine, you cannot create if you're not in your most empowered and best place. It doesn't, the insight from outside of yourself or the universe or whatever can't happen. So those first 2 things are really important, and it only takes a few minutes. Recognize, reframe, and reimagine. And then I say rebuild. So put in some really good habits that will help you stay at a high mental state, or a high mentally tough and a high resource state. And then the last one is always relearn. For me, I always go back and reflect. I just had this experience. Why did I have this experience? What did I learn by reframing and reimagining? What possibilities came to me that were different than what I would have thought had I kept myself sort of in a lower elevated state or a non-resourceful state. And there's always something, like there's always a nugget of, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, that before. And it goes back to my what we were talking about at the beginning. It's that choice. I get to choose my thinking. I get to choose how I respond versus react. I get to choose how I want to go through my day. I get to choose whether I'm going to, go through it as my best self or not. But it's a simple little easy tool to do, and it doesn't take that long. And
I love
it's just
it.
a habit.
And I like this concept of choice when it comes to making a choice, and then a new one tomorrow can be different because you've got new information. And that's what in the work that we're doing, is this concept of unlearning, and to reevaluate the information, the data that's coming in, and forgiving yourself for the decision you made yesterday and giving yourself permission to make a new one today or tomorrow. And it's a lovely thing. So that recognize, reframe, reimagine, rebuild, and relearn, a fantastic, like you say, very simple process that we can all follow.
Where that came from, Ross, was that that was March of 2020. And I was like, okay, 5 clients just canceled. I have no income coming in the way that I would used to. Am I going to lose my house or not? So I just sat down and went, you know what? I think people I think people need resilience right now. I think they're really going to struggle going through this global pandemic. I felt it in my heart. And I said, well, I'm going to create this for myself, and then I'm going to give it to the world. And I started demoing sessions of it, and then it just went like wildfire. In fact, it was my #1 revenue generating stream for 2020, as it kind of caught fire and really helped, I think, people I talked to. So
it's beautiful, isn't it? This concept that I've come across called knowledge philanthropy. Marshall Goldsmith talks about it, a few others, of, you create something and share it, and not try to protect the IP of this great concept or idea or thinking. And actually the rewards can show up in a multitude of ways, from building confidence to you getting recognized, for other people then to accelerate their own progression, and for you to be rewarded in multiple ways, whether that's an applause, a check in the bank, or whatever it might show up for us in terms of our ability to then, create more. Because it will give us confidence that, hey, I came up with something that was useful. And what if I've now learned this, now I can create something else new. And as servants and teachers, we're often assimilating information, contextualizing it, and then sharing it in order to allow people to reevaluate. And I love this concept of reimagine. And you mentioned about getting into the state where reimagination is possible. And you said, when we're under stress, when we're in this fight or flight, our brain is compromised.
yes.
We need to be in neutral gear so that we can decide, do I go in first, second, third, reverse, where do I go? And that's our ability to have flexibility and be curious when I'm in neutral. So creating that mental space to reimagine is really a practice that we can all get to, but recognizing that we need a mental state of calmness to allow that to really flourish is wonderful. Is there a question that you would have loved to have been asked that I haven't asked yet, before I then ask my final question of you, Karen?
I think you've covered off all of the really, great points. So I'm good.
I think I've got 2 bits that I want to cover, because a lot of your work, as you said, is around exploring how executive coaching works, transformational leadership, development, all around people, and how they can create their best future selves, giving them the mindsets, giving them the skills, and helping them through, whether it's adversity, building resilience, all of these things that's sort of half theory and thought and reflection, and half practical things that people can really do. In terms of all of the people that you've been working with, say in the past 18 months, because we're all in this similar storm, we all have different boats, but we're facing massive disruption of what was normal and uncertainty, and things are accelerating, whether it's technological acceleration. We go, oh, this is great, I can now do telemedicine and I don't need to go to somewhere, or this one, I liked how it was before. We all have things that we might feel are better or worse. What are the types of things and types of skills that you think are going to be the most essential to thrive, to shift from a coping and survival mind, and struggling mind, version 1 mind, to this mind of it's happening for us, we are in control, we have freedom? What are the underpinning skills that you think are helping that shift for people? I'd just be fascinated as to what you see them as. And I think you've mentioned a couple, resilience being one of them, but what others are there, Karen?
So again, I go back to like that self-awareness piece. So really, really get into self-awareness and your story and what your mindset is. It is a game changer. I know it sounds really simple. It can be simple, but to get into the practice and habit of doing it. Because listen, Ross, I think change is accelerating. I don't think it's slowing down. I think there's going to be, it's not just change, it's really disruption to work, our way of life. And so we really do need to build our mental toughness and resilience up through that self-awareness, that awareness piece. I think I love curiosity. I've mentioned that. And to just not shut things down right away, and maybe learn just to ask some questions. What's happening? Why am I feeling this way? What's my definition at this moment of this situation? Where have I experienced this before, in the past? I think 3, to remind yourself of all of the great things that happened to you or that you've achieved. I have a to-do list. I review my to-do list once a week, where to help me not get so overwhelmed with everything that I that I have going on, and just to remind myself of what I've accomplished this week. That I think this is the new human frontier. I don't believe in self-help. I wish we'd get rid of the term self-help. I really believe that everything that we need in life is inside of us. We often will ignore that inner voice. So I think that the next part of the evolution of us as humans is really trusting ourselves and preparing ourselves for the change, learning how to be adaptable and agile, and knowing that it's okay, it's safe, you're okay. Have faith and not fear around the world. And remember at the time when everybody said, oh, we're going to have to work from home, you freaked out. And then remember the time when you said, okay, everybody's back to work, and you freaked out. And remember that's happening to a lot of my clients. And I'm like, really? Well, so let me just go back to kind of March of 2020, when you were complaining about having to work from home, and now you want to work from home. So we just remind ourselves that we are, as human beings, we are incredibly adaptable, and that every single day we have lived in the unknown, and just to have that sort of acceptance, like that's the human condition.
Yeah, it's interesting, the roots of thought. I think I recognize a number of things in you that are similar to me, and I think through talking a lot of the time, and you go through awareness, and it starts with there, and this curiosity, and then acceptance, and all of these things have so many intertwined links for ourselves, and life can be as simple and as complicated as we want it to be. And that is the beauty of the up and down roller coaster that we embrace. But the playbook of it's inside, it's about expansion, not pursuit, is an interesting one for me. And my last question was almost as if you knew what it might be, because you've set me up really nicely with this theme of curiosity. And it's, have you done for the first time most recently? So what was the last time you did something for the first time?
You can see my picture back there?
I can't quite see it. Tell me, go grab it. Yeah,
I'll go grab it. So, so this is the CN Tower. It's the largest tower in, like one of the largest towers in the world, second largest tower in the world. It's in Toronto, and they have the Edge Walk. And I'm afraid of heights. And so after I finished chemo treatment, I said to my girlfriends, I said, okay, that's it. I'm going to do something that scares me. Every single year, I have to get out of my comfort zone. And I said, we're going to do this. So anyways, there was 5 of us, only 2 of us showed up. So, and I was so brave. And my girlfriend Jane was like, she's terrified. And I said, don't worry, I've got this. I'm going to go first. And, you know, they put you in a harness and you walk out. And I have to tell you, the moment I walked out, my knees almost buckled, because you are like, I don't know how many stories, 500 stories above ground. And it is a really scary situation, and you really have to trust the person that you're the guide that you're with, but all of the equipment. And at one point I just had to close my eyes and go, you know what, you're here to have this experience. You know, you're okay. You have to trust the ropes. I trust myself for making this decision that I'm here. Why not just make the best of it? And that was when I was, you know, really able to lean way back and enjoy the experience. So
I love it. I love it. To do something every year that scares you, and everyone's definition of what scares us is going to be different. And it will give us perspective, and it'll help us when we reflect, to give us building blocks of confidence to face uncertainty with more confidence, because we know we've got it. We've got this.
And so, you know, jumping out of a plane for me, I'm not going to do that. Like that is just beyond, you know, I think I would, you know, short circuit, I think, my brain if I did that. However, this year I put myself out as a speaker. Now, I'm not a trained speaker, but I've had 5 speaking engagements. I have another one in Chicago. I've had one in Atlanta. I've had one in Florida. So I have put myself out there as a speaker, and I just keep telling myself, you know, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm a speaker. And so I get up and there's 500 people in the room, and I just started speaking and sharing my story, and they all loved it. And I'm like, okay, I'll hire a coach next year and you know, do more, but have to do something a little scary every single year.
It is. And the path reveals itself as we go on. You know, we're making a commitment beyond our current capability. That's when courage shows up, and you're doing that perpetually. I've really loved having our conversation, Karen, and I look forward to seeing what you do in the world. I know it's going to be awesome and amazing, and building on all the things that have helped you to here, and that there's many chapters ahead. And I just want to say thank you for sharing your authentic self. It's been a real blessing to learn more about you, and I'm fascinated to watch and be involved where I can to help support.
Thank you, Ross, for having me on today, and thank you to all of your subscribers on this channel for allowing me to be here and to share my story in gratitude.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit AQai.io to gain your personalized report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQME assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams, and organizations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favourite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.